Cindy, in the work that you do with a lot of marketing implementation, how does the brand's value really play into helping your team strategically communicate with its target audience?
Absolutely. I want to mention 2 points. One is I can't agree more with what Lucien has said and what Stephen has said. I remember one of the lessons I will never forget of my 2 years at HBS is Clayton Christensen, who is voted as one of the top 50 world thinkers. He's like the innovator's dilemma, the innovator's solution. Like if you are in startup, you have to read his book. And one of the key lessons that he has taught us, and actually he made it the topic of the last class in the program with him, was about value. And he said that value is what you make your decision by. You need to have something that you measure everything against it. So if you don't have a value system, you don't know how you make decisions by. And I would even add that you have to be clear of your value, maybe not even at the beginning, but at the pregnancy stage of your startup. So as a founder, you have value that you believe in, and this is what you will talk to your prospective, even partners with you to join that startup. So you need to be clear about your values. And I also agree with Lucien that this is a topic that you see me coming back over and over again. I think branding is like human being. Brands evolve, values evolve. The values that we all had when we were teenagers completely changed when it got to the 20s, the 30s, get to the silver fox age, right? So thinking about brand as human being, when we talk about personality and values and evolution, it's all the same with brands as with people.
Okay. Well, thank you, Cindy. Jay, earlier we had a conversation, and you were talking about how some of the miscommunication around branding really causes a lot of operational hiccups. And can you kind of expand on that for our audience?
Well, sure. And the first thing I would say is, to echo everything that's been said, is you got to start now. If you don't start branding your company yourself right now, someone else will brand it for you. And you don't want that. It's like letting someone else pick out your wedding dress. You really, this is something you want to get out in front of. Some of the misconceptions would be that doing a good job is good enough. If we just make a good product and we offer it at a good price, that's good enough. It's not. Or it's adequate is good enough. It's not. You really have to have from an operational standpoint, you have to set up the ability to deliver on the mission and the brand that you set out to create. You have the meetings and cards on the table. I'm not as much a marketing and creative person as I am an operations person. And I've sat in the branding meetings at startups, and it sounds great when you craft this mission and you say, this is what we want to be, and this is what we believe in, and this is who we are. My question always is what can you deliver upon? Because the downside of crafting anything that you can't deliver, you go out to the world and say, we are the low-cost provider, or we're the best-in-brand customer service. If you don't deliver on that, it's almost, you're dead before you start. So from an operations standpoint, there has to be some kind of a consistency or achievability between what you craft as your branding message and what you can deliver upon. It's very difficult for startups. I wish I had an easy answer for it, but it's very difficult for startups, but something to keep in mind.
And Bruce, I want to get your take on the article also, and the current climate with some of the startups and with the work. Obviously, you work with Marcum, and it's kind of a different animal, so to say.
Sure.
But I just wanted to get your perspective on what is happening out with the community.
Yeah. Is it possible to over-concur? I think everyone's spoken very well, so I won't rehash. But I was happy to hear the responses that we heard. But I'll say this, so as to not be redundant. When you're starting, if I can talk about that, when you're starting, what you have a lot of are ideas and identity, and what you don't have a lot of is everything else. So it seems foolish, seems like you're wagging the dog to say, well, forget about our ideas and our identity. Let's go figure out how we're going to ship this stuff, or you know, even our packaging. So one, I think you play to your strength. You know, you've shown up against all odds with passion and ideas. Sure feels like that's a place you want to double down. The other thing is, the second thing I'll say is that while if you don't have an identity, you can't be wrong, you also can't be right. And I think probably people with a strong sense of brand and a strong sense of identity in their business or anywhere else are probably tough enough to have been wrong a couple times. But you have to give, and this is the old salesman in me, you have to give something people to say yes to, pardon my syntax. And lastly, I'll say, and I'll appropriate something that someone said about somebody who was not the nicest person, but not the person you're thinking of, said that if you can, and I'll paraphrase, but if you can get a group of people to agree on ideas, however outrageous they are, you now have a uniform. And if you have a uniform, you have an army.
You know, I wanted to expand upon the discussion, because Stephen, you and I have had discussions about what's going on in the startup community. What are some of the reasons why you think some companies really don't value the branding process or see it as something that they should enter into when they're, you know, starting the concept?
I think, and I can't remember which panelists mentioned this, but I think they get too enamored by the product or service that they're selling. Mm-hmm. They think that it's going to do the job just by itself, just by actually having it presented and discussed. And they think marketing needs to be a little frivolous. They think the branding is a frivolous activity. And I think what they don't realize is there is value in the brand. That's the piece that I think is challenging for them. In some way, operationally, they're challenged because they have to figure stuff out. So it becomes more of an afterthought. With the startups that I've worked with, it's always been like the last thing they think about. The first thing they think about is let's develop the product, the service, let's do the right thing, let's talk to the people we're already talking to, versus the people who we really need to be talking to, or the customers. Mm-hmm. So I think the thing that gets in the way is their own selves, that they think just by making this, that's going to be enough, and not realizing they really do need to start with that branding conversation early on.
Like, I think one company that's really coming out of the box, I don't know if anybody's heard of Beer Brand. It's a company that's catering to a lot of young men, I would say, that want to grow beards. And they don't fit like into the traditional sense of a beardsman. They're kind of well-groomed. They're very stylish. And so I think from the onset, their mission is really to just throw out the negative connotations of bearded gentlemen, that they're lazy, slackers. And so their brand value and their mission is to change people's minds. And actually, Disney has changed I would say their perception of beards, and they're relaxing their corporate code on facial hair. And so when you look at their messaging, and from the get-go, you kind of get a sense that it's something beyond just selling products. That they're really catering to a movement. They're catering to men who really want to express themselves. And I think that's what you're kind of talking about. And I did some research on the company, and it seems like the founders really get it, that if we're competing with other men's grooming products, but how are we different? And we're different because we're catering to something larger than ourselves, something that our target audience can buy into.
If I can,
yeah.
Believe it or not, my barber has an Instagram account that has 400,000 followers. It's called Nasty Barbers. He's 24 years old.
Oh, yes.
You know Nasty Barbers?
Yeah, I know him. Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
So one of the things that these people notice is that this is a market large enough to segment.
Oh, yeah.
Because, he's in Orange, Connecticut. He's, but, and I know, but yeah, no, it's very astute of them to say well, everyone is, it's not just hipster beer,
Right.
it's let's carve out our corner.
No wonder why he has such perfect beard.
That's it's a nasty beard.
Yes, thank you.
If I could just, and Steve brought up some really wonderful points, and I think a lot, if you synthesize what you guys are both saying, it's about the experience, right? And this is such a buzzwordy, BuzzFeedy word, experience. Yeah, everything's an experience. Cat's Deli is an experience, which it is. But it really is, branding now, you're an ambassador, you're an apostle, you're a representative of an experience. And some of the mistakes that a lot of startups do or commit that I see is simply treating branding as another line item along with shipping and prototyping, et cetera, and then you go, oh, logo, slogan, website, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And they think, all right, we have these things, we have this stuff, we have a logo and a name and so we have a brand, let's go. And it's an uphill battle, but we have to rein them in and say that's not, but you don't have anything. You don't have anything that people can relate to. You don't have material for that conversation that's going to help you achieve some sort of a position in the constellation of all these other brands that are out there that are competitive. You need an experience. You need a way to dialogue with the consumer, because your logo, your slogan, your website, etc., it's table stakes. You have it to exist. But if you take a company like Square, for example, which I think is a really wonderful example to look at, great branding. I mean, they were helped by the fact that Jack Dorsey was part of it, etc. So they had some buoyancy there, but still, the idea of taking and reimagining credit card acceptance for small businesses who were cut out of that conversation was a pretty revolutionary idea, and it could have failed had they called it Zoom Pay or anything that would seem edgy and cool and dynamic. And they just really distilled it down to what is it that we're about? How are we going to empower and help the small business person?
Do you think that they actually had this conversation when they named it? I never thought about it in the context that you just said that. It's square.
It's a square. Yeah,
it's not just a square, but it is square.
It is a square, and I think what's different about them is the conversation integrated product design, which is a systems approach, right? It works with this particular thing, and you have to use that, which is the Apple model. But also, how are we going to, what is our brand voice? How are we going to talk to mom and pop shop or a guy selling t-shirts at the Brooklyn Fleet? Because that's who they were going after, right? There's a story that one of the co-founders of Square, he was trying to sell a piece of art at an art fair or something. $2,000 sale, but he couldn't, the buyer didn't have $2,000 on him. And just walked away and said, I'm sorry, I can't buy this crystal bear or whatever it was. And that was the spark, that was the catalyst for that whole initial conversation of, there are millions of people that are out there that are shut out of that credit card conversation. It's ridiculous. There's no reason for it. How can we democratize that entire process? And the thinking is when you're reimagining something, you bring it down to its most molecular, granular piece, which is you start with a square and you design to that. A square is a building block. You can build on top of it. You can make different shapes out of it. You can, create an entire suite of vernacular, square up, square, what I mean? There are all these other things that come to mind when you're smart about your branding. So, had they thought, all right, we have this thing, right, this device, we're going to call it something and then just put it out on the market, very likely it wouldn't have done what it did.